All right, so we're starting with Irvin that's got Bloodhound.
Yes, there is a Bloodhound for Linux. It's really useful in getting into Active Directory on Windows, and now there's a way that you can use it in Linux to do things like LDAP dumps.
Do people
Uh,
use LDAP on Linux?
yeah, like when connecting to Active Directory.
But they don't have Linux in Active Directory, right?
They do.
They
They
do.
absolutely do. You can set up your Linux boxes to connect with your Windows network.
Hmm.
Oh, okay. And then this will give you all the permissions of all the groups and everything and help you find like weak spots.
Yeah, it can do a dump of who's in that, who's in the domain, what their groups are, that kind of information.
So you can look for logic flaws.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it makes sense. The one thing that's not in our classes because we never have complicated Active Directory setups. All right. And Kaitlyn is cheating.
No, not me personally. I would never cheat, especially not when it comes to computers and altering their programs. However, there are people out there that do cheat, and they cheat at video games. So what threat actors are doing is they're taking advantage of that. They are spreading their malware within the cheat engines that these people are downloading and using, because they're all not official, right? They're not going to be hosted on websites that vet all their software. So this stuff is prime for backdoors. And so that's what we're seeing now are these adversaries throwing backdoors into game cheating and modding tools. And this is actually nothing new. Of course, one of the best ways to get a virus today, as it was back in the day, is to use pirated software.
Yep.
You go on these sites that have illicit software, and you think you're getting one thing, and you get a backdoor with it as well.
Yeah, all the key gens I've seen have all been malware.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, well, that should be a good place to hunt for interesting malware, really. All right, and Alan's got McDonald's illegally spying on workers. It's illegal?
It is illegal, at least in this case.
Oh,
At least that the allegations are of illegal behavior. Vice News has been running a series of articles on McDonald's and an alleged spying operation being run out of its Chicago and London offices. And the allegations, and these are coming from whistleblowers from inside of McDonald's, are that McDonald's has a team of internal intelligence gatherers who have been monitoring the social media postings of people, McDonald's employees, who are active inside what's called the Fight for $15 movement inside of McDonald's. And the allegations are that these intelligence operatives, who are full-time employees of McDonald's, have been using a few different tools that have been unnamed, to very closely monitor exactly what these activists are doing, posting, who they are interacting with online. In other words, a lot of activities that might be surveilled by government, using methods that might be deployed by a surveillance apparatus in a government.
yeah.
It is, of course, illegal to perform such acts by an employer on its employees. So this Fight for 15 movement has filed a lawsuit, or has rather filed a complaint with the federal government, U.S. federal government, and which will now take up an investigation into this. And the process will probably take forever, years and years. But if McDonald's should be found to be engaging in this behavior, then they face federal penalties for doing so, because it would run afoul of the the National Labor Relations Act of 1935. Because
Boy, that would be great because as far as I can tell, anti-union activities are just running amok and there's no stopping them like Amazon.
right, yeah, well, that seems to be a popular activity right now amongst many different employers,
Yeah.
some of which we've talked about. But technically you should not, as an employer, you should not interfere with the workers engaging in any kind of union organization or communication about union organization, and it's illegal for the employers to monitor any such communications.
Well, as far as I can tell, there's no enforcement of that whatever going on.
No. The reality is that much of American business practices are still legal, even if they're illegal.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of the Hatch Act, which Trump just flagrantly violated and nothing happened.
Yeah.
And there's quite a few things that are officially illegal, but just seem to be completely ignored lately.
If you can lawyer up sufficiently, it's not a problem, apparently.
The other one I know is the California Sunshine Act. I mean, at our college, we have like a union and a academic senate, and they just kick them out of the room to like pass rulings and then let them back in later. So they have all kinds of private secret meetings where they make all the real decisions, which is a clear violation. And again, nothing happens.
Right. And then some frustrated academic will send an email, and then nobody responds to that. And then that's that. And that's the end of the story.
Yeah. So, I mean, whatever that Sunshine Act thing is, it seems to be in practice have no effect.
Yeah. Well, I imagine if the union actually grew a spine and lawyered up, there might be consequences, but that will never happen.
Well, maybe not. I don't know. Anyway, it's interesting to see. Anyway, so there's a couple of the articles here about the targeting cybersecurity researchers. The North Koreans have been at it for a while. This one I saw a lot on Twitter. They've been warning us. They have made specific fake social media accounts pretending to be people, actor controlled, like Piper Webster and Carter Edwards, trying to invite people to conferences and sending them like malware samples and say, I'm having trouble analyzing this malware. Can you analyze it there? And when you run it, it puts like a backdoor on your machine and such. So targeting cybersecurity researchers, which caught my attention. And also in the SolarWinds breach, they hunted the Russians. That was the North Koreans doing it. And the Russians went through some probably public records, and they figured out which analysts inside the NSA would probably catch them, and they targeted them specifically to read their email and find out if they were onto them. So this is making people wonder if they should improve the OPSEC inside Homeland Security and NSA, so that it's not as easy to figure out who is going to analyze your stuff. And this came out like about 12 years ago. There was a big scandal because at that time, very few people could analyze viruses. There were really only like 10 people doing it. And so the viruses started having specific names of researchers in the virus saying, you rotten bum, you won't get me this time, or something like that, an insult to that person in the virus. And then the Russian mob actually kidnapped one of the virus researcher's daughter and held her and demanded that he stop researching their stuff to get her back. And that caught my attention, and that's why I started teaching malware analysis, because I said the only defense of this is to change the economics to where more people know it, so it is no longer plausible to personally kill them all. And of course, by then there were textbooks coming out, and this was becoming common knowledge. There were no longer just a few people doing it. But anyway, it is. It reminds me to be grateful to be very unimportant and small. If you actually were like one of the top researchers in the world, you would be targeted by these campaigns. Anyway, and Liz has got the Chinese government using facial recognition.
Well, yeah. Now, so these were actually crooks using it to get past, to commit some kind of tax fraud. And the articles didn't really spell it out in great detail how they did it, but apparently what they did was stole a bunch of high definition facial recognition images from a surveillance system dump, and then use those to essentially create deep fakes of people. Maybe not deep fakes as much as they animated the photos to make it look like the people were sitting in front of a webcam. I expect for a remote like Zoom meeting with government tax officials. and were able to pull this off somehow to make it look like the people were actually in front of the camera when they weren't.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think it's because your face is your authentication. So if it looks kind of like you, then they can get in your account.
Yes, exactly. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
But they got caught and prosecuted. So,
well, this is the issue with biometrics. That's always the problem. I mean, you can't change it.
Yep, exactly. And, the other issue is too, just like this has happened with fingerprint databases as well. Once those get dumped, then everybody can use them to authenticate as you. So
everybody has photographs of them everywhere. So
right.
This kind of means that using your face as authentication is a really dumb idea.
Agreed.
Yeah. Is that funny tweet that you retweeted, Sam, that I retweeted, of a lady about to make a purchase, and then she gets down to pick up something, and then it charges the guy behind her?
Yeah.
That's what this reminds me of.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's the issue. Apparently, they have important things going on in China that use only your face to authenticate you, which seems like a pretty bad system. I don't know if there's anything in America that would do that yet.
Well, we were just talking about it a couple weeks ago with the airlines are trialing it to use it as your boarding pass, essentially.
Well, yeah, but I mean, that is not so bad because you have a very small list, like 100 people getting on this plane. So
true.
But you could already sneak on a plane by just stealing someone's boarding pass. They don't check your ID or anything. So, I could or even copy a boarding pass. I could just delay you somehow, show up at a plane with a boarding pass and get on. They don't check your face or anything. So I think that's actually an improvement in security if they check your face. Anyway, let's see. Then we've got Irvin with Intel wiretapping. Oh, I remember this one.
Yeah, Intel apparently has, what is it called? ClickTail on their site. So whatever you're clicking on, whatever you're viewing, it's recording, along with dates and times of visits.
I wonder how many websites do that. They measure everything you click on.
I'm sure there's a bunch who do.
Yeah.
But Intel's being taken to court over it.
So that would be, does it record every key press also, I suppose?
Yeah, I suppose it does, yeah.
So
recording and or session replay.
And they're calling that wiretapping. I can see a legal problem here because if the internet is telephony, then it falls under CALEA, and then they have to keep a database and make it possible for cops to wiretap it. So normally everybody on the internet has been carefully avoiding any legal equivalence between the internet and telephones for exactly this reason. So if they're going to start prosecuting internet activities with wiretap laws, then they're going to be subject to lawful authorized wiretaps.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. This might be opening a kid can of worms.
Yeah. It's one of those things that we need to follow along.
Oh, yeah. So this one has not been resolved yet, right?
Right. It hasn't been resolved.
Yep. That's why I think there'll be a lot of interest in just settling it out of court rather than setting the precedent that the internet is really a telephone. Anyway, so this is the one 3 people wanted to do this one, Ubiquiti. So Kaitlyn, what's happened to you with this Ubiquiti?
So yes, a bunch of us wanted to do this story. Unfortunately, the first thing I do when I get up in the morning is I read the news, and I'm starting to get into the habit of just posting news links when I read them in the morning.
This is a good habit.
Yes. And it's just a time saver for me because it means that I don't have to spend the evening looking through stuff. I just do it all when I'm doing the news anyway for myself. Anyway, so there's a story here on The Verge about Ubiquiti, who had somewhat of a breach. And they told people they had a little bit of a breach, don't worry too much about it. But apparently there was a whistleblower at Ubiquiti who said, wait a minute, no, we're underreporting this. We didn't just have a breach, we got completely owned by some hackers. And apparently, I'm still not entirely sure what happened here, but it involves a LastPass, attackers getting access to like a LastPass password database, which I always thought, like, I love password managers, but if an attacker ever got access to one, or even just an important one, it's game over. You know, like it's like getting creds on the domain server. You know, it's game over at that point.
Well, I think
Oh, go on.
didn't they force people to set up cloud accounts to manage their
They did.
infrastructure?
Yeah, they did. And this has to do with AWS as well. So the attackers got into the AWS. They got root keys from the LastPass database of passwords. And then apparently, so they got full access to the company's AWS servers and the LastPass account. And they were able to essentially grab, private keys, signing keys, source code, just source code, content, secrets, full access. Like they just got everything. And it was just a huge breach. But of course, the big story isn't that there was a huge breach. Those happens all the time. The big story is, of course, that Ubiquiti tried to cover it up, which means we don't necessarily trust this company anymore.
And Ubiquiti makes routers and hardware. Is that what they make?
They do. They actually make security products, which makes us even worse. No one blames the company usually if there's a big breach, right? Because that happens to every company. And no matter how good your security is, there's always that 1%, that something's still going to happen. But when you lie about it, when you try to cover it up, that's when you lose trust, right? Like Cloudflare gets owned all the time, but every time they get owned, they're always like, here's what happened. Here's what we're doing to clean it up. And you trust them because of it.
Yeah.
Ubiquiti, didn't do that. They tried to cover it up. They made the fatal mistake. And as a result, I mean, I for one, am not going to be buying any or looking into buying any Ubiquiti hardware anytime in the near future.
Oh, well, I might buy it just in order to hack it, but.
And how many networks were compromised as a result too,
Yeah.
I have no idea. Like I said, these people run their hardware as the backbone of a lot of networks. People protect their entire network based on, Ubiquiti products. So all this stuff could be completely, open now. So
yeah, I was debating getting a Ubiquiti access point because my Netgear is super chatty and I blocked it from talking outside, running my Wireshark stuff and seeing that. But yeah, after this, I was like, never mind. I was even thinking of making a Raspberry Pi into an access point.
It would be interesting to see how much it really affects their business, because in past breaches don't seem to actually have much effect on business, but we'll see.
Well, it may be different this time because there was a report coming out yesterday evening that the hackers got source code.
Yep.
So, but it's true. Since the initial reports in January, the stock price has gone up by, was it like 25, 30% in just a couple of months? So they seem to be doing just fine.
That's usually what happens.
Yeah.
It usually has.
Although apparently the reason why they didn't do a full disclosure back in January was from legal. They were concerned about the impact on the stock price.
And maybe they were right.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Well, the owner of Ubiquiti also owns the Memphis Grizzlies NBA basketball team. So he's got some debts, presumably.
I guess. Well, and then Alan, you're up with Huawei.
Yeah, this is a report out of the Netherlands and the De Volkskrant newspaper, which has been covered by a few other outlets, picked up and rehashed by a few other outlets. Apparently, going back to 2011, Huawei had access to customer accounts of the Dutch Telfort mobile service provider. And there were a number of accounts, a few dozen accounts that Huawei allowed Huawei to have access to pretty much all customer information. And Telfort had no monitoring, no logging set up. And so they have no idea what information Huawei accessed, if any. And apparently Telfort had been warned about this multiple times by the Dutch intelligence service, AIVD, and they pretty much brushed it off. But it's only now turning into a story.
So wait a minute. They got telephone service from a Chinese company where all the data is just held by the Chinese company and they don't even monitor it?
Well, the data is nominally held by Telfort, the Dutch company, but Huawei had a number of accounts that allowed them to have full access, essentially
Why?
full access to all customer information.
That's not normal at all, is it?
No,
Yeah.
no, not at all. And so there is, of course, some consternation about this. But one really interesting part of the story that has not been picked up in the scant English language media, but is mentioned in this tweet that I also linked. So, mind you, it's just some random guy tweeting on the internet. Who knows if it's accurate, except among Dutch speakers, because in this Volkskrant, the Volkskrant article, this tweeter claims that the Dutch intelligence service AIVD knew about this because AIVD had hacked into Chinese networks and into Huawei, and that Dutch intelligence was actually monitoring Huawei's activities.
Now, Huawei is on the hate list in America, right? We're banned from using their stuff, I think.
Well, yes, and the US government's been leaning very hard on various governments around the world to prevent them from purchasing Huawei 5G technology.
But what exactly is America accusing Huawei of doing?
Well, I don't know about the specifics because it's always very vague, but the accusation seems to be that Huawei is a Chinese government owned entity or partially owned entity, and that because 5G is so integral to all communication, or will be, this allows the Chinese government to have direct access, a backdoor essentially, into all 5G communications wherever Huawei equipment is installed. But what I have been hearing from many governments, including European governments, is, well, this is just the US trying to pull a power move and trying to scare companies and governments from using this much cheaper Huawei technology, and that the US government would rather have everyone use, I guess it's Qualcomm equipment, which is much more expensive and is probably backdoored by the CIA.
Yep. Now, did the Chinese actually do something bad to the Dutch?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
But there's no evidence because Telfort had no logging in place. So they really have no way of finding out. But maybe AIVD knows since they hacked Huawei.
Yeah, well, I keep seeing these disturbing articles and there's never really enough information to form much of a judgment about it.
No, there isn't. But what's really interesting to me is that a smaller country like the Netherlands has an intelligence service with the capabilities of pulling off an attack like this.
Or maybe they just had a partner account or they got some access.
Now that's true. They could have been talking to the Belgians or the Germans or some other intelligence agency.
Yeah, well, it's interesting to hear about. And so then I saw a guy complaining about how cryptocurrency did not scale, and it reminded me to look this stuff up. Because people have been talking about how the blockchains are getting sped up, but they're not. I mean, Bitcoin for years has been running about 3 transactions per second, and Ethereum, which says they're faster, runs about 15 transactions per second. Whereas Visa is currently running 1,700 transactions per second and claims they can scale up to 65,000 transactions per second, which is why I've noticed the same thing when I did anything in cryptocurrency. You can only get a prototype running like CryptoKitties, and as soon as it's popular, the blockchain can't handle the transactions, so you can't really get anything going. So there's now it's NFTs. There's always something that is new, that is exciting for about 6 months, and then it crashes and burns because the blockchain can't actually handle enough traffic to run anything that hits any scale. Anyway, there are some scalable blockchains out there, which somebody tweeted me this one I didn't know about called Solana, that is running some ridiculous number of transactions per second. And then there's Radix, which I did know about and put in my homework a couple years ago, where you don't have a blockchain where everybody mines the blocks. Instead, you have sharding, where you only mine a small subset of transactions at your location, and other people mine other blocks. And that way, it doesn't bog you down by having to mine the whole blockchain on the miners. So there are ways to make blockchains that would be able to handle more transactions and less wasteful of energy. We're just not using them yet, but they're out there. So I'm beginning to think I'm going to have to teach blockchain again next semester in my 141. I was sort of hoping it would just go away but it's getting bigger and bigger, and people are taking it more and more seriously. Visa and MasterCard and everybody's getting involved in the big banks. And none of them seem to be bothered by the fact that it makes no sense. It doesn't solve any problem, but they just believe the mythology that it's somehow going to solve every problem of mankind to use the blockchain, and they're jumping in. So it's, I guess maybe there will be jobs programming this stuff. I still think of it as a bad investment, but anyway, I collected some statistics about the speed of it, which is one of the big issues in blockchain, is that it's not fast enough, in addition to other complaints about it. Anyway, Liz has got Amazon and
Yes.
fighting unions, which has been outrageous and hilarious.
Yes, much like Alan's story, major union suppression.
Yeah.
Because they're like, no, let's do the $15 minimum wage. That sounds good now. You don't need to unionize. We'll pay you enough. And so that's been going on. And, we just talked about during our last newscast how there was Amazon undertook a Twitter war with certain politicians who had
Elizabeth Warren,
like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. And the funny component about this is the tweets were so antagonistic that one of Amazon's own security engineers was like, hey, he opened a support ticket, or he opened a ticket like saying like, hey, I think maybe we got hacked because these Twitter accounts are pretty hostile, and they were made from the web interface and not the standard tweeting tool that their marketing department uses and stuff. And I just thought that was pretty interesting that they were so bad. Their own security team thought maybe we should look into this and see if we got hacked.
And there are these Amazon ambassadors that are actually paid by Amazon to tweet in favor of Amazon. And they have a special word in their title. And so everybody started making fake ones to tweet outrageous things. And then Twitter started taking them down. So it became a sort of hilarious meme thing.
Yes.
But it is Amazon is so sleazy. I mean, I saw the diagrams. The place where they voted on unions in like Georgia is just covered with misleading signs everywhere. And they're sending everybody text messages and everything saying, don't vote for the union. And they're just paying people to post, oh, Amazon is great. I don't mind. I never have to pee in a bottle or anything. They treat us wonderful. We make plenty of money. Don't vote for the union.
Right.
And they
but this is not, these tactics are nothing new. This stuff's been going on for at least 100 years.
You would think they'd at least cover it up. They're so blatant. And now we had the vote like last week. They voted on whether to have a union, and somehow it's taken forever to count the votes. I don't understand why that is either.
Yeah,
right.
There's a whole long process of verifying the votes and setting some aside that they want to debate on. And yeah, it's going to take a while. They're purposefully going to slow it down.
Well, Biden is in favor of the union. Boy, if we had unions in America again, I think that would make things a lot better. Unions seem to have been just sort of crushed over the last couple of decades, and we really need
that unions would be helpful, but also I think a huge one would be universal health care, because people are really just prisoner to their jobs because of the fact that our health insurance is tied to our jobs.
Yeah, I know. I thought the pandemic would at least get us health care, but it didn't, which is really a shame.
Me too.
Yeah. Well, anyway, all right. And then I've got Irvin has got not wasp, the bottom 10. So is this an April Fool's joke or what?
It doesn't look like it's an April Fool's joke. It looks like Burp Suite made a list similar to OWASP's of things that they have found and made their list. It's an interesting read.
Yeah, I looked at these and they're right. If you run a vuln scanner on something, it will always flag this same stuff. Like Nikto always flags these 10 stupid things that don't matter to waste your time. And that's what these are. These are like the common false positives of vuln scanners.
Right.
Like missing security headers. Like there's 10 security headers you should have, but you probably don't really need them all. And it always whines about that.
Yeah. Exactly. So that's what this list is.
Yeah, which is pretty cute.
Found. It's not like, oh my gosh, stop the presses.
Oh yeah. Well, actually, it is one of those annoying things. You have to learn to ignore all these things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had to deal with that too. A lot of people send in vuln reports to websites, and I kind of have to go through and be like, well, I mean, you can technically change it. It's not really a vulnerability. I mean, and then you make the changes only to stop the people from sending in those stupid reports.
Yeah. And I've got people nagging me with vuln reports for my deliberately vulnerable servers to be hacked, and I'm like, yes, I know it's got SQL injection. No, I'm not going to fix it. Okay. All right. Then, selection effects of dishonest behavior from Kaitlyn. I thought this was very interesting.
Yeah. So on another topic here, there was a paper recently released, March 2021, by, I'm going to mess up people's names here, Peter Hodek, Stepan Banik, Marek Hudek, and Marek Vranka. And I'm sorry if I messed up your names. But anyway, this looks at unethical behavior and how that reflects in a larger social context. And in summary, basically what they found is that people that are low in moral character, meaning they'll lie, they'll cheat, they'll do whatever they can to get ahead, they will likely dominate environments where cheating is enabled, right? So if you're like in politics, where you can, lots of different ways to cheat in politics. The people with low moral character are the ones who are going to rise to the top. And more worrisome is that if you try to limit the preference for cheating in these environments, like you set up rules to make it so you can't cheat, or it makes it harder to cheat, all you're doing is selecting for the best cheaters, or as they call it, the worst fraudsters. And this explains so much of the world that we live in. If you ever think to yourself like, gosh, how do all these scumbags make it to the top ranks of society? Well, there's some studies about this apparently, and it's not in your head. Yeah, no, these people that, become very rich and very powerful, often it turns out are indeed low in moral character, and that's not a coincidence.
Yeah, and I've heard, I think there's something like, there really are like 5% of real psychopaths, and they tend to cluster at the top of industry, CEO and stuff.
I've heard that too, right? Yeah, so the number of psychopaths and sociopaths that are like CEOs or run businesses is percentually like a lot higher than you would find in normal society. Yeah, they do rise to the top. And sometimes that's actually intentional too. Like it's not just, oh, it just happens to happen because, cheaters are going to cheat and they're going to win. Often companies are started by people who aren't sociopaths, but they need to make hard decisions. They need to figure out who they're going to lay off. They're going to figure out, how are they going to maximize profits, or how they're going to, pollute the environment or something like that. And so they hire people that they know are complete liars, the complete, low in moral character, so that they can make those hard decisions that would be hard for other people, but not for, people who don't care. Like I would have a hard time firing anyone, even if they were terrible people. I would have a hard time, saying, oh, I'm not going to pay you any more money. You got to go find a new job. I would feel terrible. But there are people out there that, don't have that same reluctance. So, and they are selected.
Yeah. Well, it's nice to see social science that can find some truth like that. And anyway, this one here I thought was fun. The flat earthers. The flat earthers are like the original conspiracy theorists. They've been around for a long time, and they're actually sort of organized. But I didn't realize this. The flat earthers hate the Freemasons. And this has been going on for a long time. So this flat earther burned down Freemason temples. And apparently a lot of them burned down Freemason temples because they blame the Freemasons for spreading the pernicious lie that the earth is round. And this has been going on for a really long time. And so they have the nicer flat earther that doesn't approve of arson, explaining how those bad flat earthers, they're in the bad flat earther group that burned down temples. And the other thing that came out a few weeks ago is the flat earthers came out with official statements denouncing QAnon, saying, "What's wrong with you people? This stuff is nonsense." So, I mean, the flat earthers are sort of the Catholic Church of the conspiracy theories. They're the old established one with like rules and some degree of like dignity about it. But they just believe the earth is flat. And I hear a lot of them. Like, you know, about a month ago, some guy actually took off in a rocket to like prove the earth was flat. And he finally like managed to kill himself with his amateur rocket and stuff. Anyway, so I thought that's kind of fun.
That is one of the most awesome ways to go in life. Make your own amateur rocket and kill yourself in it.
That's what Elon Musk wants to do.
But maybe not. But maybe not when you're suffering from terminal stupidity.
I think that's also what Elon Musk wants to do. He wants to fly his rocket to Mars and die there. This is a strange life ambition, if you ask me. Anyway. So
I just want to mention that for those who are interested in anti-Freemasonry sentiment, there's a book about this titled "Who's Afraid of Freemasons?" by Alexander Piatigorsky, who was a professor of mine once long ago.
So who is afraid of Freemasons? What exactly is the problem with them?
I'm not entirely sure, but there is, at least within the Freemason community, a sense of persecution over the years.
Well, I think a few centuries ago, they were seen as like pagan and unchristian and corrupting your morals. But lately, they just seem sort of innocent and harmless.
Right. I have not read the book, so I cannot answer that question.
Okay.
But Alexander Piatigorsky did back in the day.
All right. And so Liz has got the mafia fugitive caught by cooking.
Yeah, so this was pretty good. This guy who was on like the Italian most wanted criminals list was hiding out in the Dominican Republic, and while he was hiding out there on the beach, he decided to make some instructional cooking videos for how to make different Italian dishes, and covered his face but not his tattoos. And they recognized him from his tattoos and tracked him down and arrested him. So if you are an international fugitive and you decide you want to make some cooking videos, you better work on your OPSEC a little harder.
I think I heard that they can actually get your fingerprint from like a photograph of you these days.
That's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
I have not heard that. Really?
Yeah, I think probably not a YouTube video, but like an iPhone photograph, which are now really
any high resolution, whether video or picture.
Wow.
Right frame, like a glass with your fingerprint. Yeah.
Wow. It reminds me of the story that you showed us yesterday, Sam, about the guy getting convicted based on DNA evidence from a discarded COVID mask.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty impressive. Yeah, you're leaving evidence everywhere. You know, if you're going to be a bad guy, you really have to greatly alter your life to hide. And you got the April Fool's joke here, or Liz Stern.
Yes, just a couple of fun ones. For folks to check out. Good pranks every year. So the second Suez Canal, which is not really happening. It was a pretty good article in the Guardian, though. And then CERN is not really building a space elevator accelerator, but it's a pretty entertaining read.
Yep. All right. Well, that's it. I guess we'll be back on Monday.